All right.
So just full name.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm Sarah LeBoeuf, and I served in Bulgaria, which is Eastern Europe, from 2006 to 2008.
Ooh, and I have to say right away, I made a mistake. I thought you were in Gambia. So I did all this research on
Oh no! Well, it's so funny. I actually have a good friend. She's an Okie who was in the Gambia.
No.
But she is currently not in Oklahoma.
Oh,
She is
okay.
currently in Morocco, so that would be difficult. That would be yet another difficult interview to try to do.
All right, so
Yeah.
you said you were in what country?
Bulgaria.
Bulgaria. Oh, well, that's going to be very interesting.
And it's so funny, before I left, I had people, giving me well wishes, wishing me well in Bolivia. They're like, oh, it's going to be really hot where you're going, presumably. Good luck.
So much.
I just kind of smile and nod for most of those. Because I too had to learn when I got my packet. I can't remember what they call that packet, but when you get your packet of telling you where you, at least back then, the selection process has changed since then. But at that time, you got a packet in the mail saying, congratulations, you've been assigned to, you're going to, and here's all the information on your country and your region.
Yeah.
So I said, Bulgaria, yay, I got it. It's here, and I got my information. And as soon as I read that country, I read what was there, but I immediately put it down, and I got online and started looking up everything I could about Bulgaria, because I, like many Americans, at least in my experience, just were not familiar at that time where Bulgaria was.
When I got my notice that I was assigned to the Philippines, what?
Yeah.
What? Where is that?
Where is this?
I mean, I was so stupid. I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's go back. First of all, we're going to start with your background.
Okay.
Where were you born and when, and your parents and siblings, if you got them?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sure. So I'm an Okie, born and bred. I was born and raised in Midwest City, here in Oklahoma, and I'm the youngest of 4 kids, and my parents, my father was a military kid, Air Force kid, and so my father's side, they moved here from Ohio. That was the last state they were living in before my grandfather was stationed to Tinker. And then my mother was born in Oklahoma. That side of the family, their roots were here much longer, and quite a bit longer. So all of, my siblings, all of us born and raised in Oklahoma, just in different areas. But I was born and raised in Midwest City. And again, like I mentioned, the youngest of 4, there was some military presence in my family, for sure. My father's a Marine veteran.
And his name and your mother's name?
His name is Richard Porterfield.
Okay.
A Marine veteran, served during Vietnam. My mother's name is Carla Phillips, and her father served in the Navy in World War II. His father served, I think in the Army during World War I. And then but going back to my father, his father was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force by the time he retired. I almost said graduated. By the time he retired from the Air Force. And he retired at Tinker before they ended up moving to San Antonio, Texas. There's another big Air Force presence in San Antonio, and he retired from military, but he went on to continue to do some aeronautical related type work, engineering aeronautical work there in San Antonio. So one military city to another military city, or at least heavy presence. So that's kind of where the environment I grew up in. Midwest City, San Antonio, all of the Oklahoma City Metro, and San Antonio. That's where I spent most of my time growing up as a child.
Okay.
Yeah.
It sounds like there was your whole family history was imbued with military service. And
Quite a bit. It was either, there was a large presence of either military work, military involvement, enlistment, as well as civic, community minded. The other half, I would say a good portion of my mother's family were very civic minded and held a lot of different local city official positions of varying kinds in different cities, mainly in southeastern Oklahoma. So, and I was familiar with that growing up. I grew up in a family that loved, at least on my maternal side, because I was around, majority of them were still being local. I was around so many of them growing up, and they also happened to be a family that loved telling stories, and also passing on stories of family and just life to the next generation, and always loving when people got together, when family get-togethers, any small or large, no matter what, there's always reminiscing and storytelling and jokes and just looking back and together as a family. That was the environment I grew up in, largely.
Would you say public service? That it was obvious that your family believed in public service, and not only believed in it, but practiced it?
Yes, most definitely.
And that had some kind of impact on you?
I think most definitely, whether if it was epigenetically or through my, again, that exposure to hearing the stories, being mindful. My great-grandmother was like the first, and I'm so sorry, I'm probably going to get this wrong now that we're talking about it. If at any other time we were talking about it, I could probably get it right.
I understand.
She was the first female treasurer for McAllister, or for that county. It was a county
Pittsburgh
seat.
County.
Right. So, and my grandfather, my mother's father, he did a lot of Chamber of Commerce work. So I, again, just had that exposure, whether if it was intentional or unintentional, and definitely conscious and subconsciously exposure.
And they not only held these positions, but they liked to talk about them. There were lots of stories that went along.
Again, it just so happened I was around that side of the family that also had the gift of gab and loved to talk about it and share stories with one another and enjoy that together. My father's side, they may have that. I just wasn't around them as much. Again, distance just made that part difficult. They also were, my grandmother, on my father's side, my grandmother found ways to be involved in the community as a military wife, as well as, a housewife, but she tapped into the local arts and crafts scene wherever, especially in the latter years when she wasn't having to raise kids and didn't have as many, they had 3 children, and so once they were all, the majority of them, out of the house, she was able to really focus on some of those interests of her own, and that being the arts and crafts area and of society and her community. And she was, so all the years I knew her growing up, she was involved in the community, in the arts community. Which
so there was no way that you were going to wind up being a wallflower.
Maybe the writing just wasn't there.
So, did you graduate from Midwest City High School?
I did. So we moved around quite a bit, just for various reasons during elementary school. So I went to different elementary schools, but the last couple years of elementary school, I was at Eastside Elementary. We were the Jets. It is no longer called Eastside Elementary. It's, I think, Midwest City Elementary School. But I was a Jet at Eastside, and then I went to Jarman Junior High, which has also been dissolved since then, unfortunately. They combined Jarman and Monroe High School, or junior highs, together since then. But I went to Jarman Junior High, and I was the Jet. We were the Jets at Jarman, and then I went on to Midwest City High School, where we were the Bombers.
Did you ever meet W.P. Bill Atkins?
No, I did not. But my grandfather, the Chamber of Commerce president, grandfather, he was familiar with.
Oh yeah, I bet so.
Yeah.
I went out and interviewed him a long time
Oh,
ago.
wow.
Obviously before he died, in a big house on a lot of land in Midwest City. I had no idea that Midwest City even had countryside like that.
Right, right.
But
Yeah.
he was like a country squire out there, and
Interesting. I wonder
had a
where
great
it was.
time.
Yeah.
I can't even remember exactly why.
There's some beautiful spots.
Oh, it was.
Definitely.
So, when you were in high school, did you have any idea what you wanted to be?
So in high school is definitely when I was thinking more about that, more concretely. And I wasn't certain what I wanted to go on job career-wise, what I wanted to be per se, and what I wanted to grow up and be. But I knew that I enjoyed people. I wanted to, I had definitely found, tapped into that desire to want to work with people, help people, work together with folks to toward positive change, whatever that may be, whatever that could look like for folks, whether that be on an individual level or a larger community macro level. I knew that. I could tell that.
So you did volunteering before you became the volunteer?
A little bit. I was a little bit of volunteering for. I was in school. I did 2 or 3 sports depending on the years of my adolescence. I was doing either 2 or 3 sports a year, and I had a part-time job. So
you didn't have much time.
it was yeah. But some of the volunteering I did do was through my family's church, or where my family went. So that was, I would say, the largest exposure for me to community service and involvement. But as I got older, I definitely found there were other ways that that I found that I could contribute to community outside of just through like church service, specific service. When I was in high school, I did have, I wasn't one of those straight A students. I was an AB student, and I also wasn't in a lot of AP courses. I wasn't in a lot of honors courses, but the one honors course I did take was government, and I loved it.
Why?
My teacher was Dr. Brown was his last name at Midwest City High School that year. I just had a great interest in the workings of government, local, national. I think in my family, hearing stories, knowing the importance of involvement in community, involvement in politics, that was passed on. And so when I was in government in high school, and the fact that it was honors, I just ate it up. And I loved learning about the whys and the hows and how things are structured and how things work, just the wheel of it all. So while in that course, we found out, our class got word about Colonel Powell coming to Oklahoma City he held, I guess, not a rally, but like a speech, and it was actually at Lloyd Noble on the OU Norman campus, speaking about AmeriCorps. And
I'm not familiar with
AmeriCorps.
Colonel Powell?
Yeah,
no, I know AmeriCorps.
Oh, yeah.
Not Colonel Powell. Who's he?
He is, he was in the cabinet. I want to say he was...
You mean Colin Powell?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Oh, of course then. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Yeah. Colin. Speaking of my grandfather earlier and thinking of colonels, yes, Colin Powell. So Colin Powell came to Oklahoma, spoke at Lloyd Noble on the OU campus in Norman, and he was here to talk about AmeriCorps to high school students. And
why was he talking about AmeriCorps? Was he affiliated?
Yes, at the time, I think he was doing, maybe, I don't know if this is the right word, PR.
Yeah.
He was somehow involved with AmeriCorps at the time. I wish I could remember some of the details, but I just know that Mr. Brown in government informed us all, and I and a bunch of my friends drove down. I think it was even during school hours. I think it was during the day. And we got a pass from school, and we all loaded up. I drove in a bunch of my girlfriends down to Norman and saw him speak, and it was it was an amazing speech. It was very informative and very energizing. I think that was a seed for me. I kept that kind of back in my mind for, I think, eventually what led me then to not AmeriCorps necessarily, but Peace Corps. So
Was he inviting people to?
I think it was a, hey, here's this great organization that exists. If you don't already know about it, here's what it does, and here's how you could be involved, and here's how you yourself can learn and gain a skill and a trade, as well as give back to communities. Whether if it's, because as AmeriCorps, as you and I know, it can be, you can stay local and do AmeriCorps work, or you can go to a different state in a completely different region of the U.S. to do that kind of work. So I think it was just a lot of educating high schoolers as to what their options could be moving forward.
It's both a public service, but it's also a great adventure.
Yes.
Did he? Do
Yes.
you know if he ever mentioned that part of it?
I wish I could remember more details.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I'm sure he did.
It sparked your imagination.
Yeah. Of how maybe I could pursue this desire of working with, collaborating with people in community, my neighbors, and just life, my local society, through a different means, through maybe something such as AmeriCorps.
Yeah.
But
and organized something.
Yes, and organize something.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, then when can you remember about what year that was? It would have been your junior or senior year in high school?
That was 1999 and or 2000.
Okay.
It was that school year, 99-2000 school year.
And then when did you start college?
I started in the fall of 2000.
Okay.
Yep.
Where at?
I stayed, the old slogan, I stayed close and went far. I stayed home. I kept a job that I had that senior year in Oklahoma City, and stayed living at home with my mom, and took classes, full-time classes, and did part-time work at Rose State College.
Oh, okay.
So went to Rose State, did 2 years there, and I loved it. I loved Rose State for lots of different reasons. Great. I had a lot of great instructors that I may not remember their names, but I remember their faces and I remember the courses. My very first course of the very first day of college there at Rose State was 8 a.m. Intro to sociology. And again, I can't remember that professor's name, but she was tremendous. And that course I think I decided in that first semester, sociology was the field I wanted to pursue for my bachelor's.
First semester.
Yep. So because of my desire to work with people, and I had this desire to learn and figure out why we do what we do, who we are as humans, and our relationships with one another, and again how all that works. But no, I personally didn't want to dive necessarily into the psychological component of those relationships and the why we are who we are and why we do what we do. But so in that sense, sociology was perfect, being the more macro of human relationships, and the human body, both mind and body. Sociology does can take a lot of that into, there is some psychology involved
Sure.
in sociology, because the mind is a part of the body. So that was the perfect fit for me. So I finished out my 2 years at Rose State, and by then I knew I transferred to OSU in Stillwater. I had a good friend that was going there. And
why'd you take that wrong turn?
I was not wrong. That was the best turn. I definitely grew up in a family that was house divided, for sure. But my grandfather, my mother had gone back to school after different jobs, raising kids. She went back to school and did get her bachelor's from OU. But prior to that, the only other family member I had in my immediate family that had graduated from university was my grandfather, her father. He graduated from OSU. After he came back from World War II, he went to OSU, and my grandmother was going to OU when they met.
Oh.
And he was about a year older than her, I guess. They both had family in McAllister by that point, so it was my grandmother's freshman year at OU. It was wintertime. They were back home in McAllister, and they had mutual friends, and I think they'd gone to like a winter dance or something and met. And that following summer, they were married.
Yeah,
and
great.
She left OU and up to Stillwater she went, and they moved into married housing up there. It was called Vet Village. A lot of veterans were living.
Yeah.
Yep. So they moved into Vet Village there in
So
Stillwater, off the campus.
So that's kind of how you became an Aggie. Is that right?
I was around those grandparents a lot, and that love of the Cowboys and the Aggie spirit was strong. My grandfather was very proud of that experience and his time at OSU.
So in Stillwater.
And so was my grandmother. She did courses at OSU as well. She just ended up not being able to graduate.
Oh, okay. That your years in Stillwater were you still wanted to be a sociologist. You still wanted to major, and you did, right?
I did. I went on to continue my pursuit of getting my bachelor's in sociology, and my minor in psychology, and I spent 3 years at Stillwater. Loved it. Had a job on campus, a little part-time job on campus, and did all my courses. And so I spent a lot of time on campus, and I loved my courses. I had amazing professors. I loved the campus environment. I had great friends. It was a great, wonderful experience that I do not regret.
Wonderful.
But being there at OSU, and as you know, they used to have a recruitment office, Peace Corps recruitment office.
I do know that.
Yes. Yeah. So while there, and I wish I could tell you how I first learned about Peace Corps, the recruitment office on campus. I'm sure it was some flyer, and I'm sure it was a come meet and greet, learn about us, learn about how you might be able to be involved type of. They used to do coffee talks, I think is what they even called them, at Hideaway Pizza, right off of campus. And that was my first. That's how I ended up bridging, that seed of AmeriCorps when in high school. Yeah. Having that, getting to learn about Peace Corps. That though is what sealed it for me, because I had already had a great interest in people, right, at large, but personally I also had this great interest and desire and intrigue to different countries, different cultures, different practices, different belief systems.
Where'd that come from, do you think?
I don't know. Just being a curious spirit. Who knows exactly? I mean, there could be a lot of different things that probably played into that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, before you went to see the Peace Corps recruiter, what did you know about Peace Corps? Had you ever even heard
I don't
of
think I had heard of it other than stumbling across it. I had to have when looking into AmeriCorps.
Probably.
Yeah. I think that would have been probably my most foundation knowledge of Peace Corps prior to then. And I had also just kind of gotten really I'd thrown myself into just getting my bachelor's and figuring that life out, at school. But it must have been either my junior or my senior year. And I did 5 years total between the 2 years at Rose State, and then I did 3 years at OSU. So it was my junior or senior year that I think I came across Peace Corps, went to the multiple different coffee talks at Hideaway Pizza.
More than one. You went
yeah. And then once I decided that I'm going to do this, I'm going to apply, I started going to all their meetings, all their get-togethers. They used to have Return Peace Corps volunteer get-togethers there in Stillwater. There was a big presence. I think a lot of RPCVs came back to be professors on campus as well. So there was a pretty good presence then in Stillwater. There may still be.
So quite an environment for anybody who was interested.
Right.
All these people.
Yeah.
And they couldn't have been better people for somebody who's interested.
Yeah. And even though I didn't have, because I think Peace Corps can be have a heavy presence at agricultural schools. And
sure.
OSU being prime for that here in Oklahoma, even though I wasn't, and so there were a lot of RPCVs that I met who went to countries and did work that I didn't have the skills for, and I didn't necessarily have the desire to do.
Right.
But
sure.
the exposure was great nonetheless. And as you and I know, Peace Corps in one country, in one region of the world, can be so different yet so similar and so much the same experience in another completely opposite part of the world. So
absolutely.
It was enlightening all around nonetheless.
Did you have friends who were kind of enthused about Peace Corps too?
I did not. No.
So you would go to these meetings pretty much by yourself?
Yeah. Got to meet people there, make friends, acquaintances and friends through the meetings, but none of my already established friends had an interest. I mean, they were interested in it for me. They thought it sounded great, sounded exciting. I think a lot of feedback I got from my friends that were both at OSU and other friends that had, pursuing other things here in Oklahoma City, or friends that had moved out of state for school that I'd kept in touch with. The feedback I got was, that sounds exactly like you. That sounds perfect. That's right up your alley, Sarah. That type of feedback. So,
did you get that kind of feedback from your parents too?
My mom was excited. My mom loved the idea. She thought, yes, I think she believed. And she understood
it's 2 years away.
Yes.
You're not going to see me for 2 years.
I did end up coming back once.
Oh, well.
But other than that, yes.
Later. At the time.
Yes, correct.
It's going to be 2 years.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
I think she was really excited. I think she did believe it to be a good fit for me. My father being a Marine veteran, I wasn't as excited to have that conversation with him. But what I did was, that senior year, I think I was home one weekend. I came down to Oklahoma City from the weekend, and he lived in Edmond. So I went up to Edmond. I said, "Hey, let's go out and get something to eat, just he and I." And my stepmom stayed at home, and he and I just went together to go get some Mexican. And I sat down and I said, "Okay, I want to let you know, here's what I'm doing." Was the gist.
And what stage were you at when you had that meeting with him?
I had already applied. I was in the application process. Yep.
But you hadn't been accepted?
I believe I had one, if not two, meetings. I think did the application paperwork, had one or two face-to-face meetings, and they wanted me to do just a little bit more volunteer, get a couple more volunteer hours as well.
Peace Corps?
Peace Corps. So that summer after, I think it was after, oh gosh, all this is blending together, unfortunately. But I I did spend, I know it was a summertime, that I spent a couple hours, I did spend part of that summer here in Oklahoma City doing some volunteer work with the DHS and working with kids that were in the foster system. Yep, currently within the states.
Okay, so let's return.
Yeah, so
what is your dad, how was he taking
having
this?
that conversation with him, I informed him that about the Peace Corps and that I had applied and that this is what I was doing. And he just sat there, just real quiet, and he said, "Will they issue you a firearm?" And I said, "No, Dad, that's not what this is. This is the Peace Corps."
Peace Corps.
Peace Corps. That's not what they do. If there is turmoil or conflict, volunteers are removed from that area. Mm-hmm. Number one, and then number two, we don't go to areas where there's already conflict and turmoil. Mm-hmm. So there is not that need. There is not that worry or concern.
So that must have been very good for him to hear.
Yeah.
He didn't have to worry about that.
Good enough. Yeah. I don't think his time abroad was only during service.
Well, you said it was Vietnam too.
Correct. So any other knowledge or information he had of countries, communities, current affairs is all just through, a particular lens that he had here, a news lens that he had. And it wasn't very wide reaching of a news lens. So he had, I think, a very particular frame of mind and thought and fears.
Okay. What about your siblings?
My being the youngest of four, to go back to them, each of them ended up at different points after graduating high school, either right from high school or maybe they did a year or two of school and then went on. But each of them it also ended up enlisting. They all went into the Navy.
Okay.
So again, to kind of backtrack, whenever I graduated high school, everyone was kind of looking at me saying, friends, family, would look at me and say, "Okay, Sarah,
here we are.
You're next. What are you doing? You're next in line." And I said, "I don't know. It's not. I don't think that's for me." I did briefly consider maybe reserves at my time at OSU, but I remember speaking with my sister, calling her on the phone, and she was still in the Navy. She's the one who stayed in the Navy the longest out of my two brothers and my sister. I remember speaking with her on the phone one time and telling her about it, and she said, she just told me no. The gist of the conversation was no, don't do it. I think she just knowing what I wanted to do in life and kind of where I was headed and what my interests were, she didn't believe it really to be a good fit for me and to be worth the time and investment that is expected and really needed for somebody going into the reserves.
Did you just accept that and move on from there, or did you try to argue with her and say, "No, you're wrong about this"?
No, I kind of took it, and I think it's because I also knew deep down that it was that it wasn't the right fit for me either.
What was it?
And that was
you mean the military?
Reserves. Yeah, military. Yeah. And that was also, I believe, before I came across Peace Corps.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So it was while I was at OSU, but it was before I learned about and really dived into the world of Peace Corps.
So those Peace Corps people at OSU gave you the application and lots of advice, I would assume. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They said what it would be like, what to emphasize on your application, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. what to keep out, stuff like that.
Yes, yeah, we definitely did talk to you. The recruiter was great. Gosh, I want to say her name was Amy, but I know that's not right. I feel so bad, but she was great for me to be able to go and talk to and get consultation and get feedback. And she would look at some of my some of the information, some of my application statements and comments and responses to the questionnaires on the application to give me good feedback and let me know if I was on track or if I needed to focus on certain areas or certain aspects. Yeah.
Because she had a good idea of what whoever judged your application was looking for.
Sure. Yep. Yep.
Okay. And she wanted to help you.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that would have been, gosh, I wish I'd have had something like that.
I know. And and it's funny because, I mean, I'm sure that definitely still exists, but I know that the application process has changed so much since then. I can't even really, I know about some of the changes, but I wouldn't be able to speak to them with
authority.
Yeah. And complete accuracy. I just know it's changed a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for you, it really worked well, it sounds like.
Yes.
The one that was in...
Yeah. And at the time, and this might have been the case, I'm not for even your application, but I know that at the time that I applied, Peace Corps asked you for your top 3 preferences of regions in the world that you might want to be placed, right? So my first preference was Africa. Kind of your stereotypical. A lot of people wanted to get.
You just said the continent of Africa, right? Not a country, just Africa.
They wanted just a region.
Oh, okay. Yep. All right.
So I put, and based on the regions as they also divided. So Africa was my number 1. Central Asia and was number 2 in Eastern Europe. And I ended up getting Eastern Europe.
So Eastern Europe was a possibility at that time.
Yes.
It wasn't when I,
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So you picked those 3. Mm-hmm. And did you have to write like an essay on any of this?
No. Not for your region picks or preferences. And my process took longer than most folks. I had to do some extra medical work for the medical clearance portion of the application. They just needed to ensure a couple of medical conditions weren't an issue.
You want to mention what they were?
Specifically, my back having degenerative disc disease.
Oh.
So they just wanted to make sure. And during those years, I had flare-ups, sciatica, and flare-ups related to my degenerative disc disease. So
they were certainly right to do that then.
Yeah. I mean, they had to do it. I understood why. I was fine with that. I ended up getting to spend more time with family and not just go immediately after graduation or graduating. So that was nice. But
so were they wanting a physician to sign off?
I had to go see I had to go see some specialists, orthopedic surgeon, if not 2 different doctors, and get x-rays and I think a CT scan, potentially CT scan, but I know definitely x-rays and MRI.
And you were paying for all this yourself? These doctor visits? They weren't free.
My health insurance at the time was, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And about how long did this take? A couple of months, maybe?
When all was said and done, I graduated in May of 2005 from OSU. Okay. And I left. I went to Washington, D.C. for staging in August of 2006.
Oh, quick.
So, yeah, quick. And, I had been working on my application my senior year while at school. So, I'd been putting a lot of work toward this for quite a while. But it was, when all was said and done, yes, a year after graduating, I then was gone.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that whole year, you were just thinking about, well, I've got all this stuff I need to get done, but it's sure going to be worth it because then I'm gone. Right.
Hung out with friends, continued working, had to get a job, keep working. I needed to be able to pay my car insurance and pay for gas, pay for food, pay for rent. I did move back home a couple months prior to leaving Oklahoma for Washington, D.C. for staging. So I had to keep working. So I just kind of keep plugging away, keep chugging at life, while also doing everything they needed me to, ticking those boxes, and just being patient.
So when did you get the official acceptance? And what was it like?
It was very exciting. I think my mom had gotten the mail. She'd gotten home that day prior to me arriving, and I think she called and told me that I had gotten a packet. Thing.
Yeah.
She didn't open it, and I came home.
If she told you it was a packet, then you knew at that point that you'd been accepted.
Yeah.
If it was just an envelope.
Sure. I mean, right. Because as an applicant, we all knew that was what the next step was going to be, was a packet that you would be receiving in the mail with your country information.
But still very exciting because you didn't know the country.
No, I knew nothing. I didn't know what they were assigning me to. I mean, I knew generally what sector of work I would be in, but yeah, all the specifics. I just didn't know any of the specifics, and this packet had it all. Yeah. So I just remember getting the packet, and I think I stayed standing in the living room as I opened it. I didn't even sit down, didn't go to a table. I stood there and I opened it up and, rip out the papers and, welcome Sarah, congratulations, and going to the country of Bulgaria. And I think it gave even when to expect staging and
what's staging
kind of your next
mean for people that don't know.
Yeah, so staging is the time that you spend. Everyone from across the country meets up at a particular location. Currently, and I think it's still the case now, but I know at the time it was the staging locations were Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, and I think maybe Los Angeles. So I knew that I was going to be doing staging in Washington, D.C., which meant all the different volunteers that were going to be going in my cohort in a group. To Bulgaria. We're going to be meeting together, and we were going to be meeting each other, our team, our country support team that is stationed here in the U.S. We would be meeting them and getting all the foundation groundwork information we would need. That was staging. So they booked every volunteer a room, flights to go to Washington, D.C. in August, and we all meet up at the Doubletree Hotel in Crystal City. I remember all the specifics of that part. Crystal City, the area.
Virginia, right?
Yeah, just right outside. And spent, I want to say 2 or 3 nights there, again, doing different breakout sessions, getting to know who was going to be doing community organizational development, or CODs as we called them, and then who of that cohort were going to be youth development volunteers, YDs. So we even got to know starting to get to know each other, not just in our cohort of Bulgaria, we were called B20s, Bulgaria Group 20. We were now going to be the 20th group of volunteers.
There had been 19 before.
There had been 19 prior. Okay. So we were all the individuals that made up the B20s of Bulgaria, Peace Corps volunteers, for that year. But then we got to learn, even smaller group, get to know each other and form relationships and bonds with our other fellow volunteers of that particular sector. Some of us were going to be going over to do. Some groups, some cohorts for some countries are, and even Bulgaria was the same way, how they were organized every other year. They had volunteers, they had a teacher cohort, ESL, English Second Language teachers. Yeah. So the B19s, they were ESL volunteers. B20s, we were COD and YD volunteers. So every other year,
what's that stand for?
Community Organizational Development, and the volunteers, and then Youth Development volunteers. So they stagger every other year.
So which were you?
I was, I was selected to be a youth development volunteer so I was a YD, a youth development volunteer within the B20 cohort,
Okay.
the Bulgaria 20th group of volunteers.
Was that just fine with you?
I was just fine. That was perfect.
Child development.
That was youth development. Yep, that was exactly what I was shooting for and gearing for. Yep. Because a lot of the exposure I'd had of a lot of my youth, the little bit of volunteer work I did have that was specifically volunteer was with kids or youth, adolescents in my younger adolescent years as well.
Now let me bring up another thing. This one is unknown to you, I'm sure. Language. What language? Surely they don't speak English in Bulgaria.
It is not. I mean, sure, their English is taught, but it is not it's not like going to Spain, where a lot of Americans or people who speak English can get around and get along just fine without knowing a lot of Spanish, for example.
So what did they tell you? What language are you going to be learning?
So in Bulgaria, they speak Bulgarian. It is a Cyrillic-based language, and Cyrillic being a language common of Eastern Europe. It is a very similar language to Russian. Russian, for example, is a Cyrillic language. So a lot of the Eastern European countries, with the exception of Romania, many of them are Cyrillic-based languages. So there are common alphabets, but not the exact same alphabet in those different countries.
Yeah.
You know, as far north as Russia down to Bulgaria and Macedonia. There's not the exact same alphabet, but there are common alphabets because, again, they're all based in the Cyrillic alphabet itself, but each country may have just a variation, may even pronounce different letters a little differently. But we received language training, very targeted. We went to language school. It was basically language school every day, Monday through Friday, for the first couple of months that we were in country.
So you first became familiar with the language when you were actually in the country?
Yep, correct.
Okay. Did it worry you before you got over there that maybe I'm not...
Sure.
Maybe I can't learn this?
Sure, yeah. It was a little anxiety provoking for sure. In the country packet, as they refer to them, so going back a little bit, when I received that packet of my assignment, in that packet they also would include some general country information, meaning they included like a printout and phonetic, self-tutorial, if you will, of what the alphabet, just to be aware of what the alphabet looks like and what it may, so printouts and kind of some worksheets, if you will, of things we could do on our own to kind of prepare and have a tiny bit of awareness and knowledge of what to expect in that aspect. So, and also just other general country and cultural information, common foods, the language, common religion, holidays.
Did you have any reservations about having been assigned to Bulgaria as opposed to a really poor country like the ones in Africa, the ones that you wanted to go to? I mean,
No.
When you think of Peace Corps, you think of Africa and South America and Central America. You don't think of Bulgaria. Right. At least I didn't.
Yeah. Many people didn't. Yeah. I had no reservations.
And your friends who were in Group 20 didn't either, right?
Mm-mm. No, I didn't really sense any apprehension at large. No. Mm-mm.
Okay.
No.
So
They
you're
were
all...
a great group. A great group of people. I still keep in touch, actually.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, just everybody's kind of gung-ho, and you're from all over the place. And
Yeah. You know, I mean, it never, I think this will always be the case, no matter what, whether if it's Peace Corps or other adventures, other jobs. There will always be someone who, once they're in it, they realize maybe this isn't either the best place, or maybe this wasn't as a whole the best fit for me after all. There's always going to be that, and there were definitely a couple of people in our cohort, but I would say the majority of our cohort ended up staying and finishing the 2 years.
well, now the majority would be 12, right, or 11.
We were a large group.
Well, I thought you said you were in a group of 20.
No, we were the 20th group
Oh,
that was assigned. Yeah, no, it's, I mean, all these numbers and acronyms, it can be confusing, but we were just the 20th group of volunteers that were assigned, that had been assigned to Bulgaria.
and so how many? You told me once before. 60.
We were, I wish I could remember.
Oh well.
I'm so sorry.
Less than 100 or more?
Yes,
than
less
100?
than 100 for sure. We
Okay.
were anywhere from 40 to 60.
Okay.
Yes, volunteers.
All right. And
I
there
wish
were,
I could remember more specifically.
so the
A good sized group.
huh?
We were a good sized group.
Yeah.
I want to say we were in the it was somewhere in the 40s.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you all had in-country training.
Yes. So after doing our couple of days together in Washington, D.C., of staging, like, here's what all you guys are getting into. Here's what we're about to do. Here's what you're about to embark on. Here's the next steps. And here's the country you're going to, you know, kind of a recap on some of the country packet information.
Yeah.
They all brought us up onto a big travel coach bus, took us to the airport, give us all of our paperwork, right, and tags and little things to yarn to tie around our bags to make sure they just absolutely don't get lost. And we know whose is whose. Everyone had the same color. Our color was green that we tied onto our bags. But we went to Reagan International Airport and flew out from Reagan and took the long trek on Lufthansa all the way over to Sofia, Bulgaria, so to the capital city. Once in Sofia, and it's not Sofia, it's Sofia.
Sofia.
Common
No, I wouldn't
error.
have known. No.
Of course. I didn't know either, obviously, prior to learning about Bulgaria. But once we arrived in Sofia, we got on another large bus, and they hauled us off into just outside Sofia. Outside Sofia is surrounded kind of by a mountain range, so we didn't have to go very far to be outside of the city, and we went up into like a little hotel out in the mountains.
Ooh, sounds great.
Yeah, it was great. Opportunity to be secluded, which was purposeful, right? Instead of being thrown into like the middle of a city. And so when you're not in classes or groups or trainings, you know, people aren't leaving and meandering, getting lost in a city. So we're all there together.
So you hardly even saw the Capitol before you were spirited
Correct. Just
away
from
up
the
into
window
mountains.
of the bus. So went to the.
Do you have a first impression from your bus ride? I mean, you've never seen anything. You've never seen a city like this before.
Right. I had, prior to this, I had been to Europe twice, but Western Europe. I had been to, Germany. I was in German in my language in school was German. So at junior high school. And in high school, I went with the German instructor and a group of other students we did like a tour, the Germany, Austria, Italy,
neat.
Switzerland, kind of a circle tour, 10 days or less. And then my sister was the one I mentioned earlier. While she was in the Navy, she was stationed during that time when I graduated high school. She was stationed in Naples, Italy. So that Thanksgiving
Oh,
of
wonderful.
2000. I remember I'll remember it forever. I went over and spent that Thanksgiving in 2000 with her and
Boy,
her other
wonderful.
friends in the military and my nephew, my first nephew there in Naples, Italy. So that was my exposure to Europe at large and my being outside of the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
I remember it being hot. I remember it being very hot, and I guess I didn't really also know what to expect weather-wise. It was here in the U.S. we got on a really big fancy motor coach type of travel coach bus, and it's and then we get out of the airport there, and it's a smaller airport, and I just remember hearing the language just being, as people are waiting for their loved ones or family or friends coming through the doors, just a line of people waiting and everyone's hollering at each other and just hollering. Me hearing a bunch of hollering and yelling in a language that I don't understand. And I just remember being tired, not understanding the language, and being hot. And we are escorted, we're all shuffled with our bags outside, and we get onto another motor coach, and it's just a much older version of what we had, something you would see in the movies type of older coach, but it was great. I don't know, I was just so excited, and I don't really have I can't really put my finger on necessarily what my exact impression was on that very first ride from the airport out of town. Because we also didn't see a whole lot of the city based on where the airport is in Sofia to where we were going. We're very quickly, we're in countryside. So I have more of an impression of just kind of the countryside really than the city, Sofia itself. And that was just a bumpy bus ride, and small roads and very small houses and clearly some farming, agricultural environment. But also, at least in the area where we were driving through, it was run down and in need of some of love and economical attention in that area for sure. So, but we went to that hotel in the mountains and did about, I want to say we were there for 3 to 4 nights. And it was just a little bit more intensive than staging, because here we were meeting what were called our language instructors. So we got to all meet our language instructors. We got to do some initial language training and Bulgarian training, as well as cultural training, and learning again more about what is Bulgaria, who are Bulgarians, and their world, their life, their culture there at the hotel. So that was kind of just being immersed and thrown into that with our Bulgarian instructors.
Okay.
At the end of our time there, we were all assigned, we were split up into smaller groups, and we were assigned an instructor. And my instructor, I was in a group of, it was me, Katie, Shane, there were 6 of us. So 6 of us made up a group that went to a small town further out. There was a region where once we left the hotel, or don't even think about the hotel in the mountains, but there was another city in the southwest region of Bulgaria where that was going to be our hub, and that's what it was called, hub. We were all assigned to a little town or village outside of our hub, which that city was called Dupnica. So I was in a town just outside of Dupnica, probably about a 45-minute drive outside.
What was the name of this little town?
My town was called Samakov.
Samakov? Mm-hmm. And about what would the population of that little burg be?
few thousand maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. And it was a town that was at the base of like a mountain resort little town, or a mountain resort area. So this was an area of this region that was common for winter skiing.
For what?
Winter skiing.
Oh, winter skiing.
Yeah, a lot of families and people.
Is it kind of a ritzy place?
No, not ritzy, right? So it's not, I had been skiing with my, with youth group. I'd been on youth group trips in junior high and high school, and I'd been skiing in Colorado a few times. And so, yes, it was a ski resort, but nothing like what we might envision in Colorado, Utah, etc. It was very small, a very small resort, and the town was small and quaint. But I think Samokov was it was doing pretty good for itself. And I think the location to the mountain and the base of the mountain of where there were ski slopes obviously would help their economics for their,
So it's an attractive setting, sounds like.
Yeah,
right?
It was beautiful. There was a river that ran through my town, and it kind of separated the more downtown area, if you will, and then an area where I lived, that was all just residential, like different residential apartment blocks, buildings, houses, and a couple of grocery store that was over on the other side, maybe on this side. I don't know which cardinal direction it was, but on this side of the river, and on this side it was the down City Hall, downtown City Hall, the bank. The market, open air downtown market was over on this side of the.
And this was going to be your assignment.
This was going to be my temporary home.
What do you mean by
in
temporary?
language, yeah. So the first few months that we're in country were nothing but language training. So
first few months.
Yes.
Nothing but language training. Is
yes.
that right?
And the act of immersion. I mean, we were all placed in with host families. We all had host families. So all six of us were in different homes.
Yeah.
So I was actually
one per family.
Yeah, one Peace Corps, one PCV per family. Yep. Yeah. And I was the only one who lived in the area that was on the other side of the river that was just all residential. That part of the city was called Samokovo. So an O at the end of Samokov. So I lived in Samokovo, and so I would cross a walking bridge over the beautiful river over to the other side and walk to school Monday through Friday. I'd meet up with my other RPCV cohort friends, and we would, like 8 to 5, so to speak, be in class. We had our teacher, and she taught us. We had it was language school. It was language school. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. We did that for about 2.5 months, I think it was, before, and then after language training, each of us were received. We did not know where we would be permanently assigned until at the end of language training.
So you were just assigned there for language training, and then you'd be moved to another location where you would spend the balance of your time.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. What was your family like? Your
my host family?
Yeah, your host family.
Yeah, the Yanovas.
First one.
They were amazing. Well, they were my only host family in Bulgaria.
Oh, you never had another one.
In Bulgaria, unlike some other countries, our setup was that really the only host family setup was for language training.
Okay.
Each of us went on, after language trainings, we all went on to live on our own.
Okay. In
our respective locations. I think there might have been 1 or 2 volunteers that lived in just a village that just was small enough that they did end up living with a family. I think maybe one person from my cohort did that. But all of us were basically had our own housing. Yeah.
So you had a host family, and that host family was going to help you with language.
And also just learning the ins and outs, the day-to-day life of Bulgaria, of being a Bulgarian, you know, of...
How many were in the man and...
I did live with a married couple, a family, Katya and Joro, and they had 2 sons. One was about my age, and he had moved off. He had actually, I think, spent time here in the U.S. In Colorado.
Oh.
Growing up where they did,
Huh.
my 2 host brothers spent a lot of time on the mountain. They both had learned how to snowboard. So, and my host dad worked at the bank, and my host mom worked at City Hall. So, I think they had just happened to have some of the financial means to be able to, you know, for the host brothers to be able. Plus, my host brothers, the older one that was my age, I mean, he also had worked. So I think he just had the financial means to be able to probably pursue that activity.
Would you call them prosperous in the community or not? Just average?
I definitely, I guess what we might think of as middle income.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. I also was their 3rd Peace Corps volunteer.
Oh,
so they were not
helps.
new. Yes,
That
they were not
helps.
new to hosting volunteers and working with Peace Corps. And but I was their first female volunteer. So because they were a small family, they lived in a small apartment. It was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment in kind of, as we might define as like a post-communist Soviet block apartment building. Just kind of very, you know, concrete, solid block apartment building. And it stretched, you know, there was a balcony on this side of the apartment, and then the other side of the apartment, just windows, you know, looking out that were able to be opened, but only one balcony on one side that stretched the entire length of the unit of their apartment. But 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment, and having 2 sons and only 2 bedrooms, they had only hosted male PCVs before. But since their oldest son had moved on, he had left the nest, and their younger son had been going to a school. He was, I guess maybe 9th grade, give or take 9th, 10th grade when I came. He was at a school that was out of town. So, so it would be me. I would be their only kid.
Yeah.
You know, during the bulk of that. There was a time that the younger host brother, he'd come home for holidays, right? And he would just stay in the living room, and I had the boys' room. That's where I stayed. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed my time with the Yanovas.
Was there much talk or any talk between you and them about Bulgaria's relation to Russia?
Yes. You know, in conversations, and I say conversation lightly, this was in my very broken Bulgarian and their very broken English. And really, and when I say broken, I mean, we had a dictionary in hand all the time.
Like Pidgin?
Yeah.
Would
yeah.
that be a way to...
Sure, maybe. My youngest host brother, when he was in town, when he was staying, like during the summer or on a holiday, over Christmas holiday, he would be able to translate because he was pretty much fluent in English. Yeah.
So there's no way you could talk to this family about Bulgaria's relationship
Not
to Russia?
truly.
Really?
Not truly.
Yeah.
But I did learn, you know, my host father, he learned in school German and Russian and Bulgarian. And my host mother, she knew Russian and Bulgarian. So Russian was a common language that they all knew and they all were taught in school growing up, for sure. But my host father, also learning German, he and I were able to speak sometimes to each other in German.
Yeah.
Because of my years learning German in junior high and high school and college. So we bonded in that commonality. So we kind of bridged together English, Bulgarian, some German, all together. Especially when my younger brother LeBoeuf, when he wasn't in town, that's what the three of us did to try to get by, with dictionaries, with a Bulgarian English translation book on the table all the time. Yeah.
Did you enjoy those sessions, or did you come away feeling kind of frustrated?
Not necessarily frustrated. It was just kind of nervous, anxious, particularly at the very beginning, because
like I'm always on the verge of screwing up here.
I just didn't know, what do I do with myself? Like, how do I even tell them? How do I even ask? Can I help with something? Can I help with dinner? Is there something I can do? I didn't have that ability yet to be able to do that. And so definitely in the first weeks, it was a lot of nerves having to just shake off in different ways and just find your groove and find a way of getting comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also learning how to read them, because a lot of this is now nonverbal language, verbal communication. So just learning to get to how to read them, how to communicate nonverbally as well as verbally. Fortunately, when I first came to stay, the younger host brother was still there. He hadn't left for the fall semester yet, so he was able to help. But I'm sure he was a little nervous too, being a 9th or 10th grader, and then here comes this stranger American female that's, he's used to having other volunteers, but they'd all been males, and
Oh yeah.
But I'm still in touch with him and his parents. My younger host brother, he's like a little brother I never had, me being the youngest. He's like a brother I never had. So yeah.
How nice.
I know. We got along so well. They were really good cooks. I really liked their food. They just happened to be a family that were pretty health conscious. So my older host brother, he had a health he had broken something at some point and had to have surgery years before, and he himself had converted to being vegetarian, and so I think the parents and the sons, they'd kind of pursued these other maybe healthier foods or something. Plus, I think they happen to just be very physically active folks. So I really enjoyed that.
But you were just across the river from 5 other PCVs, right?
Right.
It's not like you were lonesome and like you were fish out of water.
No. We often would get together. So on Monday through Fridays, after we finished school, 4 of us would go to a little pizzeria and eat. Well, we really wouldn't eat because all of our families were expecting us to come home for dinner. So we needed to be hungry for dinner.
Oh.
But we would go and get beers. And there was the other 2 folks in our group were a married couple, and they pretty much would always go and to one of their host families, because even the couple had been split up into two different host families actually. And because I think it's just logistics. I don't think there happened to be a family that would have been able to host maybe a married couple. And then, so 4 of us, my friends Katie, Ryan, and Shane, the 4 of us would, almost every day, we'd go and just debrief or decompress over a very large beer.
Yeah.
And a very large Zagorka was the name of one of the beers that we liked.
You mean locally produced beer?
Yes, a Bulgarian beer. Yep. Mm-hmm. And we'd sample, the different beers.
Of course.
And then we'd all leave from, I wish I could remember the name of that pizzeria. It was, it just had good music. It was one of the best places that we enjoyed in town. It was just easy to get in, get some beers, and get out.
So it was a great place for you to...
Yeah, right. Yeah. Gab, just, again, touch base, debrief from the day and life, and then we'd break and we'd all go in our separate directions. Katie and I actually kind of lived on I would say maybe the north side of town. So we would head off in the same direction and Ryan and Shane would go off to their host families. But Katie and I would walk we had the furthest walk, and then right at the walking bridge, she'd be off in her way to turn into her neighborhood, and I would cross the street and head to the walking bridge and keep on my trek to my apartment building.
So you had your language instruction for a couple of months in this little town, and with the others, and then you were going to go off to your permanent assignment.
Yes.
Now, were you learning anything during these couple of months?
Yes.
About what you were going to be doing?
Yes. So every few weeks we would have to take a bus in from our town, and we were told, exactly how. We were given instructions, how to do it on our own.
Yeah.
So we'd all meet up at the bus station. Our particular town didn't have a train station, so to get from Samokov to Dupnica, we would come in by bus. Some other Peace Corps volunteers would come in by train, depending on where they were. But we'd meet at the bus station, all six of us, get on a bus and head to Dupnica. And when we were there, when we went to Hub, that's what that was for. It was a time for us to then split into our two larger sectors, our CODs, Community Organizational Development Volunteers, and our YDs, our Youth Development Volunteers. And we would do youth development. I was a part of then specific youth development training, and working on projects together in that little miniature cohort.
What did it involve? Youth development?
It was, getting to know, diving into the youth of Bulgaria, discussing and learning about the trials of that youth are up against, whether that be education, income, family structure of living in maybe a town that's a village where kids after either graduating high school are moving to larger cities trying to find work because maybe there's no more work in the village that they're in. Maybe all the jobs are taken. So then they have to, and then also for us it was also learning, for me it was learning about also how many kids were completing school versus dropping out and trying to pursue a trade, trying to pursue a job, moving either to another town, village, or even country. So, and then also we got to meet volunteers that were current youth development volunteers in different cities within the country, and so we got to hear about their work, their projects, how they were maybe working with youth in their community, what they and their counterpart, and a counterpart is someone that is assigned by Peace Corps or someone who has agreed to work with a Peace Corps volunteer on projects within work. So we heard from those current youth development volunteers what projects they were working on with their counterparts in their local towns and communities. So, and we even got to take a trip at one point. They split us all up one weekend, and we took a trip I and 2 or 3 other volunteers of my cohort. We went to visit a current YD serving volunteer in her city up in northwestern Bulgaria. And we got to go to her school and see her work and she was placed at a primary school. So we went to the school, took a tour, got to meet some of her students and meet her counterpart, that sort of thing. And get to see where she lives and get to see her day-to-day life before. So just getting really to see what that's like before we then step into that ourselves.
So it sounds like it's all very very can-do, very accomplished, putting you in these settings where everybody seems to be doing well. Or I'm not talking about the kids,
right? The volunteers,
but the volunteers.
Yeah. I mean, of course, we also discuss in talking about the work and what people are doing, naturally we're also learning about what has been difficult, some of the difficulties, and maybe projects that didn't work out for
That's
other
just
volunteers.
as important, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's definitely a part of the education. That's part of the training, learning what has worked for other folks and what hasn't worked for other folks.
So nobody was sugarcoating anything, or
Right.
you didn't have the impression that they were.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So there were some people who were frustrated, some people...
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they'd tell you.
Yes. Yep. People were candid. And I think it's good to do that because you're bound to find someone else who's going to maybe be frustrated by the same things you are going to be frustrated by. Or just letting people know kind of what it allows individuals to have a more real expectation of what things they might encounter.
Yeah. So at the end of this training period, I call it in-country training, I suppose.
Yep.
You were assigned where?
So one of our last meetings and trainings at Hub in Dupnica was an assignment, I guess, ceremony, if you will. There was a big map, and they each call us up one by one and say, you're going here. And then, we'd go over and put our name on a pin on the map or something, on this big, large map. But I then was assigned to a city called Plovdiv. And it is the south central, a city in the south central part of Bulgaria.
Before we get to that, I have one other question I wanted to ask you about that, and that was, did you ever think about lobbying for a place that you wanted to go to because you'd heard about it?
Right.
You knew what their need was.
Yeah. I did not.
Okay.
So funny though that you say that, because Bulgaria, its east coast is on the Black Sea. So there are coastal cities, if you will,
They're pretty nice.
and they were nice and nicer.
Yeah.
For sure. It's where the Bulgarians, it's where everybody would vacation, as far as, like a beach holiday. There was that access in Bulgaria because of being on the Black Sea.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there were definitely some people who had expressed, I would say the majority, 99% of the volunteers in the B20 cohort were like, look, wherever.
Yeah.
I'm game. I'm up for wherever you want to put me. For me, I was more so thinking of if I could lobby, or if I felt up to lobbying. I don't remember actually lobbying, but I do remember having the thought of, I sure hope I maybe could be in a particular type of setting.
Yeah.
So not necessarily a city, but more of like a work setting.
But
I think is what I maybe had.
It still never came to you, I guess, that I know all this. Now all I have to do is convince them that I know it and ask for it, and we're all better off.
No.
Okay.
It's funny, the couple that were in my language training, the husband of that married couple that was in my language training, he's really the only one I remember specifically stating out loud, verbally, to everyone where he wanted to go, and he wanted to be on the coast.
Yeah.
So that's the only one really.
Did he wind up there?
No, he did not. Yeah.
I thought you had said that.
No. So I ended up being in a city, though, that is, at the time, and I think even present day, it competes for the second largest city of Bulgaria.
What's that?
The name of the city is Plovdiv. The other city that it competes with, they both say, no, I'm the largest city, no, I'm the largest, or the second largest, because Sofia, the capital, is the largest city in Bulgaria. So the two cities that vie for number two for the second largest, are the city that being the city of Plovdiv, and the city of Burgas, which is a city on the coast, on the southeast coast, or the southeast, yes, southeast Bulgaria on the coast of the Red Sea. Black Sea. Oh my gosh, not the Red Sea. Wrong color.
Yeah.
So at the time, I think I remember seeing that, I remember looking up Plovdiv's population being about 300, a little over 300,000 people.
Okay.
It was large.
And you said that's where you were assigned.
Yeah. Okay. That's where I was assigned. So as far as Peace Corps at large, a very non-traditionally, up to this point, and especially to my knowledge, and especially with other RPCVs that I knew at that time, a non-traditionally placement, a non-traditional placement for an RPCV to be in such a large city and in such a large urban environment.
Because most volunteers went into rural areas?
Rural areas, or just smaller towns. In smaller cities that were just, it was hard. It's harder for them to compete on that level then because of that. And so a Peace Corps volunteer is seen as a resource. And so those smaller cities are best able, at least the thought is, to place them there so they can give them another leg up. Yeah. So
give me your first impressions of your assignment, of your city rather.
So, I remember meeting, so when we learned what city we were going to, they also brought in from across the country the counterpart for each of us that we were all going to be assigned to. They brought that counterpart, came into
You mean you were going to live with, or what?
No, work with. That we would be working with. Yes, this counterpart is someone that we would be working with.
Oh, and that was a Bulgarian, not an American.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So, of each of our assigned locations, each of us at our work sites and our work placements, there was someone who worked there already, or someone in that community, but ideally it's someone who worked at the place you would also be working, someone who has agreed with Peace Corps to serve as a counterpart with you, with me. So each of those counterparts came in from each of those job sites in all those different cities from across the country to meet us that day, that night that we got assigned, that we were informed where we were going to be going in our placement city. So I remember, and maybe even 2 nights, they may have even came in for 2 nights so we could have sessions together. And I think even the counterparts received some training from the Peace Corps trainers and instructors and staff. Yes. So, but I remember we had a great time getting to, of course, it's kind of this great awkward energy.
Yeah.
Because again, still we don't have, majority of us do not have the Bulgarian proficiency just yet, and not all of our counterparts have English proficiency. So again, it's kind of just a repeat of the beginning of when we were placed, at least when I was placed with my host family. But again, you get over that, the nerves kind of settle, and you get to know someone, and you get to, again, learn how to read them and eventually figure out what other people are saying and how to communicate. My counterpart, I was truly lucky and blessed to have a great counterpart. I think I was lucky and blessed to have a great host family as well. Many of my friends did not have as great of an experience, as I did. So my counterpart, her name is Sevdalina. She goes by Lena, and I'm still in touch with her. Still in touch with some of my colleagues. Yeah, she was great. She had I ended up being placed at a primary and secondary school district, a primary and secondary school system. The 2 schools that were sister schools in a particular neighborhood. And she was a teacher at the primary school. And the year before, the 2 years prior, I actually was more or less replacing another PCV. Her name was Kate. And
were you expected to carry on what Kate had been doing?
I did. My particular placement being of replacing another volunteer was tough. I felt a lot of pressure because Kate was amazing. I met her during training and she was great, and I thought, oh Lord,
yeah.
That's who I'm replacing. Wow, and I remember now talking about this, I remember she came up to me whenever the day that we learned what city we were going to in our assignment. She came up to me and said how excited she was for me, and because she never let on that she knew that they were even considering me for her site.
Yeah.
But she did know in advance, and she came up and just told me how excited she was, and she was able to give me a little insight to people and folks and some of the neighborhood. And,
really?
Yeah,
exactly what you want.
But yet, my work experience, my lived experience was very different from hers, ultimately. Kate was the previous cohorts, probably the only married couple in that cohort as well. Her and her husband were both PCVs placed in the city. He did community organizational development there in Plovdiv, and I really don't remember exactly what his work was, but Kate was placed at the school that I then took her place. So, and I say that meaning she didn't live where I lived. I think she lived in another part of the city of Plovdiv at large. I was actually placed in the neighborhood where where the school was located. Yeah. So my experience was still, though, ultimately different, very different from hers in that regard. I also was younger than Kate. I think that and I was single. I didn't have, I think there's expectations maybe on married couples versus single adults, maybe not other folks, not trying to take someone in under their wing as much.
Yeah.
When there's a married couple versus a single adult. So Lena was someone who definitely took me in under her wing a lot. And we just got along really well. I think our personalities and meshed. And I was a little bit more, Kate was maybe she's not quite as much this way anymore, but I don't know. I do still keep in touch with her on social media, but she was at the time just kind of a quieter person than myself, more of a quiet and reserved individual, and I'm a little bit more. I definitely can be reserved, but I do warm up, I think, to where I can be a little bit more louder and a little bit more outgoing and boisterous than Kate. Mm-hmm. So mine and Lena's relationship were different than Kate and Lena's relationship, for example, because of that. So I was nervous to fill Kate's big shoes. All that being said, yes.
And what was your job?
So being a youth development volunteer, placed though within the school system or at a school or schools, to me was confusing and a little complicated, in that I was viewed as though I'm at a school, so shouldn't I be teaching? Or shouldn't I be helping the teachers teach the students? Shouldn't I be helping the students learn their English? And yes, kind of yes to all of that, but it wasn't just that I was doing. So my job description was just, it wasn't very black and white, not very cut and dry. It was get in there, work with the kids, find, make relationships, bond with students, help teachers. It was D, all the above. It was, is it A, B, C, or D? And it's always going to be D, all the above. Do all the things. Find all the different ways you can to work with students to try to build a community to build community, to build upon community in that a positive, build upon positive community impact on the youth, and to try to
Is that another way to say behave yourself?
sure, maybe, but also I think to work with kids to learn, or to work with kids to help them find within themselves to think outside the box of their life. And I probably should back up to explain my actual setting. So I was at a primary and secondary school, as I mentioned. However, these are underserved minority, a minoritized area and school population. So this neighborhood that I lived in the school, the primary and secondary school, were within what we refer to as within the Roma population or the Gypsy population. Gypsy isn't necessarily the correct term.
How would you describe it then?
It is a densely populated Roma environment.
What does that mean, Roma?
Yeah.
What is
So Roma are, or as many of us might be more familiar with the older term Gypsy, it is a group of people. So the Gypsies themselves, the Roma themselves, are a group of people that go back. Their foundation is from what is now present day northern India. Centuries ago.
Yeah.
There's this group of people that broke away from that region, and they left that region, and they kind of traveled together, and over centuries have migrated right further east into different areas, different countries and cultures. But a lot of their cultural identity has remained. So that idea of, we've all probably heard shows, school, TV, of gypsies being roamers, or the people who would come into a town and thieve from everyone and then be gone by daybreak or something. Of course, those are stereotypes. Of course, there are people who probably did travel that frequently, and yes, they were a minoritized group of people, so I'm sure there were people who did what they could to survive in that, stealing bread, stealing food, or stealing supplies or resources over time. But as a people, that is not who they are as a whole. So this particular...
But did they have that reputation among other Bulgarians?
Yes, within Bulgaria, they were a heavily stereotyped, marginalized, prejudiced.
They were prejudiced against by others.
Correct.
Okay.
They received.
Now
they were on the receiving
coming into
end.
focus why you're there and what you're doing.
Yeah. Yes. So
and
they were on the receiving
end. Most of your kids in the school are them.
Correct.
Okay.
No, the schools are 100%. They were 100%, maybe 99.9% Roma ethnic.
Or segregated.
Yes. And it's because, so the schools themselves weren't necessarily, the school itself wasn't intentionally segregated, but this is an area of town where that has been earmarked, if you will, possibly. I don't recall exactly what time frame we'd be looking at as to when this particular area, this particular neighborhood, and some even referred to as in the equivalent word, like the ghetto, of where the Roma were intended to live, separate from ethnic Bulgarians.
And there weren't politicians around saying we need to integrate these populations.
Yes, so definitely there were people who were. There were definitely politicians and local officials that were much more, both local and country nationally, officials that were progressive in that they did want to have more unity and a unified community and unified Bulgarians. And then, of course, the racism and the prejudice was still, though, very strong.
Was it as strong, would you say, as the racial prejudice in the United States when
Yes.
you were growing up?
Yes.
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 Okay.
I did often think about the parallels between U.S. racial culture and clashes, and where this country has come from, like their racial history as well. What had previously, what they had experienced, as well as what I was then seeing. I definitely had many conversations, it was a everyday occurrence to hear some slander or a sentiment that is negative toward the Roma population, in my experience. But there were definitely local Bulgarians and politicians, officials, and leaders who were welcoming, who were wanting and believed that they too, and there were Roma individuals who had broken through into leadership roles into different towns and cities.
I was going to ask if you had the equivalent there of a Martin Luther King or
not to my knowledge,
like that.
Not like one individual, not to my knowledge. But there were definitely people who did break through and make it into leadership roles in different areas.
So they were more charismatic, I guess.
Right, or just or just had the perfect mixture of an environment where they were able to have enough support to make it into maybe elected positions.
Did you use them as role models when you were talking to these kids?
I didn't know any of them that well. No, because there weren't as many, and a lot of the kids, I don't think, had a lot of awareness and insight into maybe some of those officials.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe there were any in Plovdiv that were Roma in that city in a leadership role that we would be aware of at the general level, like large enough level to be on news and be aware of that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, it would be maybe one or two officials that were maybe in Sofia or maybe somewhere else in some other city throughout in Bulgaria. Instead, it was getting to know the youth, particularly in the secondary school. It was me meeting high school students, junior high school students, and making relationships with them and forming. I had a group of students where we would get together and just have meet to practice conversational English.
Yeah.
It wasn't always in English. Sometimes it was in Bulgarian, and it's fine. But the underlying purpose was us spending time together outside of
a class.
Outside of class, and then outside of what other activities met them in the community, which were trying to find ways to hustle. Or getting roped into the unfortunate drug scene, maybe individuals, and as well as the pressure that was placed on some of the older, teenagers by some families to find a wife and to start with their own family. So there were a lot of pressures and a lot of influences combined, hitting heads with prejudice and a lack of resources for them. So it was time for us to spend together, me and my perspectives and them and their life perspectives, and just have conversations and get to build bonds, build friendships, and to have conversations and to learn from one another what life is, what life can be, what their a safe space for them to talk about maybe dreams and hopes and or what they're not happy about, what they do want to do, and to learn that there's more than just trying to fall into a particular route of trying to just get by in life.
Did you have access to community resources that you could actually, very concretely explain to your students, this is a guy who can really help you because this guy does this?
No,
No?
I didn't. I didn't.
So you didn't have guest speakers or anything like that?
No. It was all much more...
One-to-one?
Yeah. And I think the other part of that was, it was difficult sometimes for the students to know, to break. It was hard for me to break through what their stereotype was of me. Number one, many times people thought I was another student. I mean, I definitely did look older than them, but some of them looked older, and some of them were a little older for their age, for their grade. But at times it was to go back to my thoughts earlier, where it was hard and confusing at times for the students to know exactly who I was and why I wanted to spend time with them.
Yeah.
Why I wanted us to have like this English conversational group, or I can do tutoring with, and I did, because I did also help with some tutoring, both with students and with teachers, helping teachers with language, English tutoring. Yep. And then, so there was that, and then also I did help. The one thing I did carry on that the PCV before me that she started with the other teachers were summer camps. So we did that as well. Again, it was a way to provide to the community, particularly the children at these two schools. But sometimes their families would sometimes get involved. Like their little brothers or sisters would come and take part in the summer camp. So it was providing a week-long activities, and an outlet for them during summer when school's not in session, and especially, which is a time of year, even as we all know, I would say pretty much everywhere, it's a common time of year that for young folks, for kids to risk, especially if you're in an environment where you're already at risk, where you could get exposed to maybe a darker, unsafer side of society and life.
Drugs?
Yeah. Drugs were pretty prevalent in our neighborhood.
Pretty prevalent?
Yeah.
So
drug use.
Find them easily.
Abuse. I did, I definitely did find needles. I saw needles on the streets occasionally, or like kind of an abandoned area of different spots.
Did you talk to your students about their drug use? Or?
Not completely. I'm trying to think back if we had outright conversations. I definitely know that drug use was brought up, and a lot of the students that I happened to see the most and speak with the most they happen to also be students that were not interested or intrigued by any of that, and definitely spoke. There were definitely some students that I did form relationships with, and I learned that they themselves were also trying to be leaders, like within their friends as well, to kind of stay on a more positive track and not fall into, be susceptible to that potential outlet, especially if you're feeling hopeless,
Was gang membership a temptation also?
Not to my knowledge. No.
That's good.
I am sure that there was that the presence, but it wasn't overt, and it wasn't to a degree that I would be able to really speak on it.
Yeah. So that wasn't a big deal in your group anyway. Right. You weren't having to.
Yeah, it was more so. Yeah, more so just like early marriages, early pregnancies, as well as drug use. So dropping out of school, and not pursuing either higher education or just a job, moving on to actual job skills and job training. That was pretty common within our high school students, particularly within the female population. And then, so dropping out, early family, and drug use. Yeah. Yep. So those are the biggest areas that their thought was having someone from, an outside environment, not even the ethnic Bulgarian community, but someone outside of that, to show interest in them and to try to build that education and those bonds and connections, to try to maybe help with encouragement.
And that's the way they saw it. I mean, that's the way you meant it, but is that the way they saw it?
That was the way that is what I perceived them to also see it as.
Great.
Yeah. On the whole. Again, from
so
teacher to teacher,
you were really
it was
succeeding.
Sure. It didn't always feel like it. I definitely did struggle because I think the nature of my work was so loose and so not hard and fast and concrete and black and white, all those descriptors. It was hard for me to not be discouraged very often. It was hard for me to battle against discouragement.
It was hard for you to battle against?
Or it was hard for me to not be discouraged in my work and to not feel like there was more that I could be doing or should be doing or...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And plus, it sounds like you didn't have to file a monthly report saying, crisis avoided, 7.
Right.
That kind of thing.
I kind of actually forgot. Peace Corps, you do, I think quarterly. I think you have to do quarterly reports. And so I do actually now remember, now that you say that, I think I had shoved it out of my memory. Selective memory of those particular times where I did have to do quarterly reports of what I was doing and how far we've come and what what our earmarks are and that sort of work, which can, again, with the nature of my work that I mentioned, it can be, sometimes it was hard to really put a finger on an earmark, but it got done. The work got done. And yeah. I did my reports, and the teachers, especially the teachers I worked with the most, or kind of on a regular basis, everyone was really happy with the time that we spent together. And of course, you'll find, I remember, I'll never forget one day I was in the break room, or the teacher's room, at the primary school, and there was an event I think the teachers were talking about, and maybe like a parade or some kind of school event. And I remember there was a teacher sitting across the table from me, and she asked, well, is she gonna go, talking about me, asking if I was gonna go, and she won't even understand, or she doesn't understand what I'm saying, something to that effect. But she was curious if I was gonna go or not to this particular event. And again, she thought I couldn't understand her. She thought I didn't know enough Bulgarian to, and I just sat there. I let her finish what she was saying, and I just very kindly responded to her question that she was posing to other people on my behalf. So I did let her know. I did answer her question for her. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I remember, kind of to that notion, I remember. So I left in, and this might be jumping a little bit, but just a quick little anecdote. I left in 2008, and I came back.
That's
2000.
3 years?
I got
3
there in
years?
2006, and I came back, in 2008, fall of 2008, September. And I returned. When I came back after Peace Corps, I went off to grad school, and I got my master's. But after grad school was over, I returned to Bulgaria with 3 other girlfriends of mine. And as soon as we all got into country, we kind of broke apart, and we went to go see our host families, reunite with our host families. And then we all went to our sites that we worked. And I remember I walked by myself, again, we're all in our own separate respective cities, and I took my usual buses from the train station, walked to the mahala, which is that's kind of a Bulgarian word for neighborhood, but particularly one that might be thought of as a ghetto would be a mahala. So I walked to my mahala, and I walked in, and it was during school was still in session. I think they were nearing like maybe the last day of school, And I walk to the school, and I see the school cleaners, the ladies that are sitting on the bench outside the front door, and they recognize me. I recognize them. They're like, "Oh, Gospoja, what are you doing here?" And I told them I was coming to say hi to everyone. I'm coming for a visit, and this is all in Bulgarian. And they told me where everyone was, the students and the teachers, and they were doing an end of year like party at some event center there in the Mahala. So I went a couple blocks over and I found them, and I just walk in, and no one knew I was coming. I didn't even warn my counterpart Lena. I just wanted to surprise folks. And everyone was very surprised. And I remember sitting down, and even some of the students, there were a couple of students there, that I recognized them because they were the younger siblings of some of the primary school kids that I had worked with or seen at school, so it was just kind of full circle. It was beautiful in that way. But I remember sitting down and talking to one of the teachers, and she's in Bulgarian, she said to me, "Sarah, your Bulgarian is so good." How is it still so good?
Wow.
2 years later? And I said, I actually think it might be better now than it was before, because I felt so much more. I don't feel as much stress and as much pressure to speak the language and perform and be, I had a role, I had a duty and a task and expectations of me then, whereas now I'm just a visitor, I said, I think that might be it, and again, this is in Bulgarian. I mentioned just not having that stress or the pressure on me. But of course, my Bulgarian still had limitations, and it still does. I still wouldn't have been able to really get into politics. I never was able that proficient to do that, for sure. I had friends who could, but not me. But I'll never forget that. That was great. It was great.
And that was you said that was a year after you left that you went back?
That was 2
years.
2 or 3 years. I left in September of 2008, and I went back for a visit in June of 2011.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I know. Very cool. And I
sure is.
I found after leaving service, after leaving my time in country, I did, and I think I do even still to this day, occasionally, that I can even recall, will have dreams in Bulgarian, or like where I'm speaking in Bulgarian. Yeah,
wow.
It's bizarre. Yeah, really cool. And I think to myself, if only I could speak that good when I'm awake. When I'm awake, yeah, and I actually need to be able to speak it, yeah.
Did you give any real thought, sustained thought, to the possibility of staying for a third year?
Of course, I think every volunteer does think to themselves, each volunteer, I believe, does think to themselves, am I going to stay for a third year or am I not? Because it is an option, and so many people do it, and and it's just one more year. It's just 1 year. And that amount of time can fly so many times. Of course, it also can be very slow. Depending, yeah. I definitely did think about it. I did think to myself that I would like to, if my life circumstances were a little different. I had my grandfather that I was probably the closest to, he was dying of cancer. And
when?
Well, he was diagnosed.
While you were still there?
He was diagnosed right after I left in 2008.
Okay.
And I found out, though, like months before I was coming home, that he was, he had stopped treatment that year.
Stopped treatment? Meaning hospice time and,
Yep. Although my family my family did not give me specifics before coming. I think they felt that was, better for me.
You didn't need to know.
That it was maybe a need to know, or that I would cope better not having some of the specifics. I actually think I would have, I think I would have liked to have known a little bit more.
You think you might have come home early?
No, I don't think so. And I think that was their concern. They really just wanted to make sure that I made sure that I didn't cut short any opportunities, any of my experiences, and to make sure I had closure of that part of my life. for not to do that for this. And I think also, I know for sure my grandfather would not have wanted me to come home early. He was very, he loved what I had gone and done. Yeah.
So one factor of you not going for a third year was your grandfather.
Yeah.
Because he was sick.
And wanting to just be with family.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing that I could ask about is, had you been more tempted to stay a third year, would you have had goals that you felt like maybe you hadn't reached or met, or even attempted?
I think one thing that I definitely left my 2 years in Izgrov, that was the name of my neighborhood, for the school in Izgrov, Nightingale, was helping the teachers to helping them to further the work of securing funds for them to continue to do activities and to expand their resources for whatever those activities might be. Not just the summer camps that we'd been doing, but maybe something even more than that, and more than what just their school budget would allow. I definitely would have. I definitely wanted to work with them. Would have liked to have been able to work on that more. And I know that I would have wanted to work on making something a little bit more formal as far as a group with kids, especially with the secondary school kids, and trying, and then probably working on my language, so I personally could have continue to have even more in-depth conversations with varying people, kids, students, teachers, so that you could be fluent. Yeah, and just hopefully have just that much more effective, productive conversations. Yeah, with folks from all parties that but encountered. It wasn't to be. You made the decision you weren't going to do that. Right. I also, the old slogan, because I don't think they use it anymore, right? Peace Corps, the toughest job you'll ever love. Oh, I know it. Yes, right? Yes. And it was the toughest job that I definitely love and have always loved and will always love that time, but it was so tough. I personally battled anxiety and depression, or depression for sure. I had a couple of depressive episodes while I was abroad, and the second year? I mean, definitely the second year, maybe even in the first year. And I think that also, knowing that a lot of my mental health combined with my family, changes within my family, unit back home, if I had had someone from my current cohort that I knew already, any other Peace Corps volunteer, if any of them would have stayed a third year, maybe I would have considered it a little bit more, because I feel like I would have needed somebody more than just my Bulgarian couple of colleagues that I was close to. I would have needed somebody that on a deeper level to be able to have that kind of a support network like that. I think also though I mean it's good that I think it's good that I didn't. I think it was just not in the cards for me. Well, was your depression such that you might have been in real trouble? No, it was never to that degree. It was just your quintessential heavy depression of loss of interest, hope, and sleep disturbances, and being lethargic, and just loss of motivation. To function. Right. It didn't stop my ability to function. I just though did not function at my highest that I could be. Yeah. If I had and the Peace Corps did mental health checks, if you will, with volunteers. From time to time they would check in with us of how you're doing, how are you feeling, how are you doing. None of those, I wasn't reached out to during any of those episodes of my own, and I never, for whatever reason, thought to contact them
Yeah.
for support like that. And I think also at the age I was, I was in my early mid 20s, early to mid 20s, and I hadn't pieced all the dots together.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't have a lot of knowledge and insight personally prior to Peace Corps of mental health and mental health, mental wellness, and self-care in that way.
Yeah, I understand.
So, but that has informed me in my life thereafter, it's been truly helpful for me in my own journey in life through on and off depression, battle, on and off to anxiety throughout life, and different causes and reasons.
Yeah.
But I then knew what kind of support and resources I need from either medical professionals or mental health professionals or myself. So, and that was kind of the beginning of it. And I think that also helped me piece together things that maybe feelings and thoughts and emotions I'd had prior to Peace Corps,
Sure.
So,
tell me about your feelings of accomplishment from the 2 years. The highlights,
in what way?
let's say.
Highlights.
What are you most proud that you were able to do?
I was most proud of the bonds and the friendships I formed with people.
Yes, I understand completely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Everyone from my host family to my colleagues, to the students, to the kids, the little kids, the teenagers, neighbors. It was the bonds and being so different, yet finding your commonalities and knowing how common you are or how similar we all are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a tremendous learning experience, and I think most people that I've interviewed have said pretty much.
Probably,
pretty much
yeah. And then also, for me too, I did have more positive encounters than negative. So I'm truly grateful for that. I do have colleagues, I have friends currently, returned Peace Corps volunteers that from Bulgaria in my cohort, that their host family experience maybe wasn't great, but their placement site was great, or vice versa. And I did have a friend, or I had one good friend who left early. It just wasn't. It just didn't work out well for her, both language placement site as well as more so her work placement site. So again, just all that being said, I'm just so grateful, and I know that they too. There's always something positive to glean and to find from even. I don't know, but I'm just grateful. Yeah, and for their generosity and just there's moments, memories I have of being welcomed from my colleagues, from the teachers at school, and how friendly they were, and just kind of brought me in as their own, almost so much so as being their own, and kind of I felt like at times I was so much a staple that I wasn't brought into as many wings as some people might have expected or might have thought. Because it was like, oh yeah, she's fine. Yep, she's doing her thing. Oh, there's Sarah, Госпожа Sara, doing her thing. So yeah. I do kind of wish I had been able to maybe advocate for myself to be brought in under some wings, and or some more folks have thought to maybe bring me into their lives a little bit more. But I think if I'd maybe been at a smaller, I think part of that could be also being in a larger city and being in such a urban environment, and whereas versus being in a town or a village where people really did spend a lot of their time with each other, because it was, I mean, it's just smaller environment as a whole.
Right.
Whereas I was in bigger cities, a lot of the teachers, they had families that they needed to go ahead and hurry up and leave from school and take a bus, couple buses, maybe to another part of town, or go take care of their own kids, go to take care of their parents, or grocery shopping or whatever. And again, it was just a larger city. So
many Peace Corps volunteers characterize their time in Peace Corps as transformative.
Yeah.
Would you join that group, or is that word not quite transformative?
I think so. For me, I would probably agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In all the ways that I've described. Yeah. It's definitely something that I continue to identify with. And I had already identified as being a part of a global community.
Mm-hmm.
And that just sealed it for me. It really made it full circle of tangibly living that global community just on a different level.
That's exactly what you want.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're all a part of a global community, whether you do Peace Corps or not. I just chose to immerse myself into that global community in that way, different from differently.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you were going to tell me about? Whether it was an anecdote or a joke or a funny story or a sad story, anything like that that you were thinking about telling me and it hadn't come out?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many anecdotes. I could probably talk forever about them, but I won't. One thing that we all really got a kick out of was, in Bulgaria there is a alcoholic beverage called rakia, and it's very similar to the Russian drink called rakia. Basically same name, pronounced differently, same drink. It is what we would, I guess, call a brandy. It would equates to a brandy. So anyway, made from fruits, a clear liquid liquor. Sometimes it's yellow, sometimes it's clear. But rakia was kind of the old wives' tale, like cure for everything almost. If you're not feeling well, take some rakia. If you're sick, you need to put rakia on you even.
Wow.
There was one time we had a training, and in the early couple months, we went to a hotel, and many of us got food poisoning from the hotel, from one of the meals. And so we all kind of responded in different ways, of course, depending on what food it was. I can't remember what it was, but I just had, upset stomach, GI issues, and I remember texting, because we had cell phones, not smartphones. This was back in 2006 and 7. So little phones. I remember texting my host mom and telling her, because I knew as soon as I got home, I had been told from training we were going to be going into the village outside of our town, outside of Samokov. We were going to go to the village because we were going to have dinner with my host grandparents. And I told her, I don't know, in Bulgarian, in text, I don't know if I can go. I am not feeling well. And she said, oh, it's okay. We'll get you some, we'll take care of you. So I go home, and then we get in the car and we drive still. So I got off of a bus and I'm not feeling well. We get home, we get to the apartment, we get in the car and we drive to the village, and they give me bread, toasted bread with, it's called sirene. It's a white cheese. It's very much like feta. So think of like feta crumbled up, smeared on white toasted bread. So that was supposed to cure my, combined with some rakia, that was supposed to cure my upset stomach that I had from food poisoning.
Good luck.
Yes. And then one of my best friends, she returned to her village, and she lived in a village for those months. And her host mom, she just lived with an older individual, an older lady. Zorka was her name. She went home, and my friend, she was ill, like very ill. She was just like dead, laying there, couldn't move. She just was so sick. And Zorka, Mama Zorka as they called her, took rakia and slathered it all up and down her arms and her legs and her stomach and her chest, so she could breathe it in, I'm sure. And it just made her, of course, more sick.
Yes.
breathing in the alcohol made her just I think vomit. Yeah. And then another one of my best girlfriends, she returned to her village after this food poisoning. And her particular host family that she lived with, husband, wife, couple of kids, they lived in a 2-story little house in the village, but it had an outhouse. So when she got home, she had to run and vomit in the outhouse, whereas I had a bathroom, a shower, a tub, a toilet.
You had a shower too?
I did. Oh. My host parents, because I think their jobs they had decent jobs, and they had other Peace Corps volunteers, and I think they were just very, very wise in how they spent their money. They invested in and put in like a Western style shower, a tub in their apartment. That's not common. That was not common. It would be more so a room, right? Tiled walls, tiled floor, and a shower head next to a toilet or next to a sink, and often next to a toilet as well. But in their apartment, they had also had, and I don't know if the other apartments in this block apartment were like this, but block building, but the toilet itself was in its own room. So you had a toilet closet and then the bathroom. So anyway, I just really felt for my friend who ended up having to vomit in an outhouse in the ground into a hole in the ground. Yeah. So that was unfortunate. Another unfortunate anecdote, less comical, thinking of the community I lived in, I remember one time a Peace Corps language instructor, we had her, she was living in our city actually. Like she worked for Peace Corps, but she didn't have anything to do with us. At this point, we were just friends with her. Her name is Maria. And she would tutor. I think I used her as a tutor, a Bulgarian language tutor, during my 2 years. But I remember one time I asked her, hey, come meet up with me and Andrew. He was another PCV. He was an English instructor on the other side of town, where it was higher SES, if you will, versus my community. He lived near me, though. We lived near each other. So he and I were meeting up at a restaurant, like a traditional Bulgarian restaurant. They're called, oh my gosh, I just blanked. Doesn't matter. A traditional food fare, and your very folksy, music, and everything was very Bulgarian. So we were meeting up there in my neighborhood in the Mahala, and we asked Maria to come meet us, just early dinner, have a drink or something. And she and her friends, because she and her friends were out, and apparently her friends didn't want to come meet us in the Mahala because it was going to be after dark at that point. And they didn't come into that neighborhood after dark.
Yeah.
So that was another example, a little anecdote of some of the sentiment of the folks that I lived with and I worked with. I loved my neighborhood. Within the Roma community is very celebratory. Honestly, Eastern Europe as a whole, the Orthodox culture, there's a lot of holidays. For folks within the Orthodox Christianity, there's a lot of saints, right? Similar to Catholicism. They are similar sects, if you will. But they have a lot of saints. There's a lot of saint acknowledgement and saint holidays. So there's holidays. There's always something being celebrated in Bulgaria, in Eastern Europe, and in that region of the world. So I would say as a whole, Bulgarians in the country are very celebratory. And there's always alcohol at celebrations, which was tough for some RPCVs or some PCVs who didn't drink or didn't want to drink. And then being within the Roma community, they too are very celebratory within their own community together. Yeah. And I remember in my very teeny tiny efficiency apartment, it was a room and a door that did go into this very, very tight rectangular bedroom. And off the bedroom, there was a door onto a balcony, a very small balcony. And I was literally just 1 block away from the high school, from the secondary school. But often, nights, weekends, daytime, you knew when somebody was having a birthday or a wedding. The music was going, the parties were happening, the cars were up and down the street, honking horns and balloons and the music, everyone would be bringing their speakers out into the street and dancing in the street outside their houses, and it was just a very fun and festive and a very communal
it sounds
environment.
Great. Sounds great.
Yeah. And then another negative, I guess, anecdote would be there was one time or 2 times that I did lose power. Like there was a power cutoff. I can't remember how long it lasted, but I was told by some Bulgarians, I don't remember who they were, and again, this is not held by all Bulgarians for sure. There's just some who do have this sentiment, but not everyone. There were some who had mentioned that the power cutoff was due to the Roma who were not paying for they were not paying their bills or they were not paying for power as a whole. So that was, just an interesting position for me to kind of live within.
Oh yeah.
I was someone being a Peace Corps volunteer, you get a monthly stipend, right? That was the structure, was that where we got a monthly stipend, we were all set up with a bank account and an ATM card. So every month we could go to our respective ATM, take out our money, and we would go pay our landlords. We would go pay, I would go pay my electric bill. Yeah. Being in the city where we were, I also would pay for my cable bill. I had TV. I watched a lot of BBC News and local Bulgarian news, even if I didn't understand everything they were saying. But I had that access. But that's what I did. I mean, I was very much like a member of that society, of community, and paying my bills and working and living, and
that was the idea.
And that was the idea, and don't regret it at all.